Mai ai e te tipua, mai ai e te tahito, mai ai e te kahui o ngā ariki. Homi e, hui e, taiki e. Tēnā koutou katoa. No rangi ora hau, ko Waimakarere te awa, ko Aoreki te manga, ke te puti e mātua ahau I mahi ana, ke te whanganui e tāra ahau I noho ana. Ko Christian Hawkesby, taku ingoa. E nā mana, e nā reo, e nā kāranga maha o te wā. Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki te puti e mātua. So, welcome everyone to the Reserve Bank. My name's Christian Hawkesby. I'm one of the assistant governors here, and I'm delighted to be able that you've been able to join us for the launch of our Ōhanga Māori report. Just before we start proceedings, I'd just like to pause briefly and acknowledge the recent passing of Manuka Hanare. Professor Hanare was an absolute pillar of the academic and business community in New Zealand, particularly for his work on economic research and histories. And I think it's really fitting that we're here today to effectively continue on that work, bring those histories to the modern time, and to look forward into the future. E te rangatira mai, mea mai rā. Welcome to our Maori Economy Report. So this is something that we've commissioned at the Reserve Bank as part of our Te Ao Māori strategy. And really at the heart of this is about us being the central bank of Aotearoa and having a responsibility for understanding what is unique about the New Zealand economy, the New Zealand financial system, our culture and our stakeholders. And really this report is one step along the pathway of us becoming better policymakers in New Zealand, Aotearoa, for the well-being and prosperity of all of our people. Now, I'm sure there'll be foreign exchange traders out there who will ask me, Christian, is this report going to mean interest rates are going to go up or down, faster or slower? And of course, all of us in this room understand that it's a much more subtle, but also much more fundamental than that. This is a report that is going to shape our understanding and thinking when it comes to financial inclusion, economic sustainability, measuring economic activity, what is economic activity, climate change, the resilience of our financial system, and even this nebulous concept of maximum sustainable employment, which is now underpinning the Monetary Policies Committee's dual mandate. So we have commissioned Burl Hilmare and her team to undertake this report, and that's because Burl are the experts in this area, and we really wanted to partner with them. We felt like it was time for the 2013 report to be updated into the modern era and bring us along on that journey. Now, I don't want to be a spoiler and give away the conclusions of this report, but what I would emphasise is this is a fact-based report which is going to bring real substance to some of the things that we think we already know about the Maori economy. It's a report that is going to challenge some of our thinking, particularly around the diversity of the Maori economy, the size and the source of the asset base. And it's a report that's going to really open your eyes to some of the opportunities that lay ahead. And the one spoiler alert that I will give is that the future of the New Zealand workforce and entrepreneurship is Māori. And we know that because of the demographics and the population growth. So that's one little spoiler alert I will give away, but you'll get more detail on that. This is a report that we commissioned, but we very much see this as a resource for everyone And when I say that, I mean both local and central government, business, community, iwi, really just to be empowered to make good decisions. And they will inevitably be collaborative decisions, and we are very eager to sit around the table and be part of that. And so in that spirit, it's very exciting to be able to soon introduce you to Tracy Hopapa, amongst other things, the chair of the Federation of Maori Authorities, to provide more flavour on that. Kia ora, Tracy. But just to close up briefly, nō re rā, mā te rongo ka mohio, mā te mohio ka marama, mā te marama kai ora. So through information comes awareness. Through information comes knowledge. Through knowledge comes awareness, and through awareness comes life and well-being. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So, Tracy, over to you.
Ai o ki te rangi, ai o ki te whenua, ai o ki ngā mea katoa ti hei Maori ora. Ai ngā iwi o te motu e ngā hau e whākua tai mai I rungi ngā huatango te wā tēnei te mihi me te aroha ki a koutou rā ki a tātou. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning. Thank you very much for the kind welcome. Adrian, kia orana e oa. It's always good to see you. Kia ora. As Christian just mentioned, this week Aotearoa lost one of its greatest sons. A renowned academic described by his children as an extremely slow learner. A humble leader esteemed by his people and Indigenous communities worldwide. A gentleman, a scholar, our friend, our whanaunga, Associate Professor Manuka Henare was the man. In addition to his whānau, Manuka's legacy to Aotearoa Inc. is a huge body of work on the Māori economy and history, and also the very many Māori leaders that he taught and supported through the Auckland School of Business. He is legend. And so in honour of this great man, let me start by giving Manuka the very first word. And in fact, a quote from a 2017 Tangata interview with the renowned Dale husband. Manuka said, "I am now seeing the prospect of Māori one day becoming the owners again of their land, their means of production as we were for 5,000 years. That was taken away from us through colonisation. And today, Māori are becoming the owners of our land again and our means of production. So I see our role, my role in the business school, as preparing people to become the managers and the governors of Māori business and development." Manuka went on to say there is a new level of political and economic thinking that is going on now. And one aspect is the recognition that the Pākehā economy doesn't enhance Māori life. That's how he saw it anyway. In fact, he said there is work to be done to ensure that Māori business keeps developing to ensure that a Māori economy is a Māori one. Without the Māori businesses, there can be no Māori economy, and without the Māori economy, no Māori prosperity. A Manuka e te rangatira moe mai rā I rungi te tō moenga roa. E hoa, today we are here to support, or I am, on behalf of the Federation of Māori Authorities and Māori organisations, businesses, trusts and corporations, you fill in the gaps, from across the motu, to tautoko te pūtea matua and also Burl, Adrian and Ada anō te mihi ki a koe kōrua ko Hilmary. This report builds on Burl's earlier research from 2013 and subsequent reports and research documents around and about the Māori economy. This report, Te Ōhanga Māori 2018, provides context to the pre-COVID economic ecosystem for Māori. And I want to make that distinction because stuff's changed. It provides form and fact to advise the current state of the Māori economy and insight into the many layers and facts and facets that make up Te Ōhanga Māori. And the report links existing and emerging models and trends to provide a pathway forward and upon which Māori and government might work together, collectively as treaty partners. A report and a pathway that might guide and grow partnerships between Māori and industry and inform opportunities for people-to-people, country-to-country links between Indigenous peoples and First Nations and economies. In itself, and people who know me know that I'm a bit of a nerd, so I read everything, and I've read it. So look, my informed and professional assessment on the report is that it's a really interesting read. There's something in it for everyone, honestly, even some graphs and some figures for people like you, Richard Laverty. And the launch today is perfectly timed. We are at the beginning of what looks like an extraordinarily busy year, where all shoulders are going to have to be at the handle to make sure that we make the right decisions, informed decisions, good decisions about the challenges of the economy for Māori and for Aotearoa. This report then, in FOMA's opinion, serves as a tohu to help advise and assist conversations about how we can work together to address the impact of COVID-19 on Māori communities and on the Aotearoa economy, and how we can build forward faster. Reports like these are much needed. They provide a window into the importance of Māori businesses and our contribution to Aotearoa's economic future for people who don't know about us. Reports like these help make sense of Te Ao Māori for those who are still coming to terms with the multiplicity of Māori entities and organisations, groups and people, and this report should enlighten strategic and policy discussions that are happening in town here and across the motu. E hoa mā, while we are making progress as a nation, we're still not there yet. And so until there is advancement and appreciation of the Māori economy and what this means for Aotearoa, and also our significant success overall, we need leaders like Burl and Te Pūtea Matua to continue to review, revise, update and present such reports. In fact, in many ways, it was the Burl's 2013 report that really shone the light on the Māori economy and presented it to New Zealand in a form that people could understand. And it sent shockwaves through the business community, and it helped conversations that organisations like FOMA were having. Burl's long-time commitment to Te Ao Māori over the last 50 years has enabled a much-needed policy discussion and development, which in turn has helped us, and it's a tainui term, usher in this new era of Māori economic renaissance. Cal Sanderson, Dr. Ganesh Nana, former chief economist and now the new head of Burl, Hilary Schultz, tēnei te mihi ki a koe te rangatira, should be and must be commended for their courage to stand in this space when no one else would, and for their tenacity and their courage in leading such conversations when no one wanted to listen to them. We have a close relationship with Burl. We have a standing commitment to its kaupapa, its business and its people, and FOMA will continue to do that, probably for the next 50 years, Hilary. Today we see the realisation of the hopes and dreams and aspirations of our tūpuna, where Māori are now recognised for our important role in owning, operating and leading some of New Zealand's most successful businesses, and as natural and obvious partners to government and industry in the development of a more sustainable and resilient economy. As the world turns its mind to grappling with this overwhelming thing that is COVID-19, we are seeing the return to first principles and priorities for our people, planet and profit as outlined in Te Ōhanga Māori. This thinking perfectly aligns with Mātauranga Māori, where our whakapapa connections mean that land is a taonga to be protected for this and future generations, and our people are seen as our greatest asset. and also where profit encourages innovation and industry and the pursuit of other opportunities, and that's a quote from page 19. Whānau whenua and whakapapa connections and responsibilities, sometimes competing, always collective, are described in this report as a jigsaw puzzle. And while seemingly complex to an outsider, and I was talking to some this morning, these connections are streamlined and seamless to those of us who navigate te ao Māori and te ao Pākehā every day. This deep cultural ecosystem combines to frame our intergenerational long-term view, which, while still seen as a commercial barrier by some Western businesses, have nevertheless positioned Māori business to benefit now and into the future. And so it's encouraging to see this te ao Māori thinking in our everyday lives, in homes, schools and workplaces across the motu. As the Māori economy is better understood and Māori tikanga like kaitiakitanga, manaakitanga, aroha, te taiao are seen as proven universal stratagems for successful and sustainable business, more and more organisations across the motu are embracing these. And we're starting to see those come through in strategies and plans and policies. Te Taiwahanga, or the Treasury's Living Standards Framework, is a welcomed economic perspective which goes some way to reflect and align with Mātauranga Māori, with a note about the exception of culture, which FOMA believes should be a distinct capital, separate from social capital, and a point well made in Te Ōhanga Māori. Giving life to the principles of this document through the implementation and action to achieve better well-being and wealth for Aotearoa is something Māori, government and industry must commit to. As Christian mentioned, one of my responsibilities is the chairman of the Federation of Māori Authorities of FOMA. My family were involved in the establishment of FOMA. We're long-time FOMA members and will continue to be so. It's an honour, a privilege, and mostly a pleasure to be the chair of FOMA. FOMA was established by the late Sir Hepe Te Hiuhiu, the Honourable Waka Virko, and others more than 35 years ago. And the purpose was this, and I'm quoting from our original manifesto that Waka Virko wrote: to foster and promote the development, sound management and economic advancement of Māori authorities. That was the vision then. It is still absolutely relevant now. There is certain genius in strategic simplicity. FOMA has a proud track record of working with government and industry on behalf of our members to achieve better outcomes for our people in our regions. And our members represent pre- and post-settlement, most Māori entities, organisations and SMEs, some of whom contributed to this report. There are many examples of successful Māori businesses, each with strong commercial and cultural focus and well-developed governance and management capacity, anchored on the strong cultural base of whānau, whenua and whakapapa. Businesses familiar to many include Paranini Hiki Waitotara, Wakatū, Miraka, Tainui Group Holdings, Te Runanga o Ngaitahu, Wairarapa Moana, Ngāti Porou, Ngaitu Kairangi Trust, Te Arawa Group Holdings, and more recently, the post-settlement entity Heniuru. The list goes on, and we could add SMEs in there. These are all Māori-owned and operated businesses with sophisticated strategies for growth and development now and for future generations, succeeding and progressing sometimes against the odds. I'm so grateful that times have changed and we live in this time. As we look to host APEC next year here in Aotearoa with a very strong Indigenous theme, and I acknowledge our whanaunga here from MFAT, was only just 10 years ago that a paper was doing the rounds when we hosted in Auckland in 1999, describing Māori as an impediment to doing business in New Zealand and as a barrier to foreign investment. We were seen then as bringing uncertainty to determining property rights, our collectivity made us difficult to deal with, and our assets lacked size and scale. Look how far we've come in 10 years. Today, Māori are increasingly finding common ground and alignment with overseas companies wanting to engage in long-term business relationships to secure long-term supply agreements for the products they produce. Now, culture is seen as a distinct factor in building country-to-country relationships and partnerships, particularly with Asia and Pacifica, as reported by Simon Draper and the team at Asia New Zealand Foundation. Māori and Māori culture, the Māori economy, is seen as a unique characteristic for Aotearoa. In closing, let me acknowledge our Reserve Bank Governor, Adrian Orr. In his address to the 2019 FOMA National Conference held at Wakatū in Te Tauiu o Te Ōhanga Māori, the Governor suggested another model that we could consider as FOMA, a kaitiaki pledge where businesses might capture the long-term growth using the insights of tangata whenua. We think that's a great idea, and that's something we are interested in having a conversation about. E hoa mā, we are living in an era where the grievances of the past are being replaced by optimism and opportunity, a time when the hopes, dreams and aspirations of our grandparents' are being realised in our lifetime. We stand on the brink of a future where we can be sure that our mokopuna's mokopuna will live lives of limitless opportunity, of good health and security, and further that a collaborative approach between Māori, government and industry is critical for the success of Aotearoa Inc. Therein lies a challenge for us all. Anei rā te mihi, me te aroha ki a koutou rā, tēnā anō, tātou katoa.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Following on from Tracy is quite a feat, and I also want to start by honouring Professor Manuka Henare, and I think it's very fitting that we are talking about Te Ōhanga Māori today. I remember listening to one of his interviews, and he said from the 16th to the 18th century, Māori had spectacular carvings and paintings which are still prominent today. And the question was asked, he said, why? What happened during that period? And his answer was, Māori had a healthy economy to sustain art and culture. And I think for us, especially at Bill, it is about economic development is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. It's part of the system. For us, the focus is looking at how you integrate this into the system. I want to say we're honoured, humbled and excited as the Bill team to have worked with the Reserve Bank on the update of this report. Hopefully this will continue. And like I said, 10 years ago, the concept of the Māori economy did not exist. Apparently some people still don't know about it. Hopefully we can change some of those concepts today. We did a little calculation a couple of nights ago. In 2018, when this report was done, the world economy was worth $80 trillion, and Māori's contribution to that was 0.02%. So we were able to calculate what the value add is of the Māori economy to the world economy. Focusing on this, we also want to make sure that we understand that Te Ōhanga Māori is not a separate or a distinct identifiable segment of the Aotearoa economy. It is closely connected component that have numerous pieces, like Tracy said, within this jigsaw puzzle. So the aim was to look at Māori participation, contribution, and connections. Being a really good economist, we started with what you all know as an economic system that looks at, you have households, you have the government, and you have businesses, and you have savings, and goods flow back and forth. And like Tracy said, we wanted to look at the Māori economy, but this economic system wasn't really fit for purpose. So we wanted to develop a system that we can integrate and look at the Māori economy. And there are alternative systems. So we started by looking at people, planet and profit, which is sort of a sustainable system that transcends stocks and flows. And you will see in this pātaka, cultural values is underpinning people, planet and profit. We didn't measure cultural values because we think that cultural values, that people, planet and profit emanates from cultural values. So that's why it's sort of the foundation. Now looking at stocks and flows, so stocks and flows are basically the asset base and what you do with that asset base. So we started with the Living Standards Framework, which is social capital, financial capital, natural capital and human capital. Those are the resources that are used to create value add. So flowing from that, we looked at households, Māori households, and also a trust in corporations, aho whenua trust, everything entities that are Māori. So we looked at the flow from households into employment, into those trusts. We look at GDP per income, GDP expenditure, GDP production, and all of that contributes to well-being. So this is the pātaka of Ōhanga Māori that we used as a foundation for measuring the Māori economy. Now it's an 84-page report. There's no ways I can go through all the data and statistics. Would love to. So my focus is going to be on a few key observations from this report. And the first observation is we have to look beyond only treaty settlements. And I'll come back to this. The second is the Māori economy has an asset base across every single sector of the Aotearoa economy. And of course, we have seen dramatic population and employment changes from 2013 to 2018. Also, a significant broadening of the skills base of the Māori workforce, and the contribution, which is the flows from the asset base, is across all dimensions of the New Zealand economy, as well as the international economy. And you have seen through this process, we have seen delivering of well-being through numerous avenues. So these are the observations that I want to quickly touch on and focus on. And the most dramatic one is the first one, which is population. So the Māori population from the last census, 2013 to 2018, we have seen a nearly 30% increase in the Māori population. Of that, a significant part of that is under 15s. About 23% of that is under 15-year-olds, so still a very young population. But part of that, we have seen Māori employed shot up 47% versus non-Māori employed, which is 19%. But interesting within that employed is actually Māori employers. Significant proportion, so these are Māori businesses, as well as self-employed. So self-employed are normally someone that works as a contractor or as an individual, but Māori employers are businesses that employ other people. So very interesting on that front is looking at the skill level and component of those Māori businesses. So on the left is Māori employers. Now, the percentage of Māori employers, so the boss of the business, that are high-skilled is over 50%. And self-employed is over 40%. When we move to employees, there's quite a mix of high-skilled to low-skilled. So 1 is high-skilled, going down to 5, which is low-skilled. So a significant proportion of the Māori population go into business. Then, of course, moving to the asset base. The asset base has grown to nearly $70 billion. And I want to go back here to treaty settlements. Treaty settlements are $2.2 billion. We looked at the Māori entities, and a very special thank you to all the Māori entities that provided information and data for this report. Of the top 120 entities, they have an asset base of $13.8 billion. of those, about 50 existed long before treaty settlements and has an asset base of $7.7 billion. So a significant proportion of that collective asset base has existed long before treaty settlements. Now, if you look at the breakdown of this asset base, as you can see, $39.1 billion are from employers. So a significant proportion of this asset base is Māori businesses. So if we break that down into where it is, of course, agriculture, forestry and fishing is still the foundation, and it will stay the foundation. But what we've seen is actually going up the value chain with a significant increase in manufacturing. And of course, property. We have seen quite an increase in property, and that is a combination of acquiring more property, but also the other side. This is, if you can see at the bottom, it's a $1 billion scale. So what you see is, for the first time from 2013 to 2018, quite a few industries moving into billion up to $5 billion, looking at, like I said, manufacturing and construction industry and the transport sector. So the asset base, although still concentrated in the agricultural sector, there has been quite a shift in the diversification of the asset base in the last 5 years. Looking at a spread across the rohe, also interesting is that you will see that middle concentration of the asset base. So about 60% of the asset base is in that middle part, and of course down south. But there are quite a spread of the asset base across the different rohe. Within that asset base, it's also about how Māori entities deliver well-being. And if you have seen, a lot of Māori entities employ Māori people. And apart from employing Māori people, a lot of iwi and trust spend millions and millions of dollars on education grants, kaumātua grants, social grants. They also deliver a significant proportion of their fishing quota to tangihanga and to other functions. They also deliver firewood to kaumātua, they also deliver vegetables to community gardens, and they also provide health services, environmental services, education services, and all of this contributes not only to Māori well-being, but to New Zealand well-being. This is when we look at our pātaka again, where the foundation is about what do you do with your money, where does it influence, because economic development is a means to an end. This is the end. Moving from the stock, from the asset base to the value add. So this is where we talk about that $80 trillion in the world. The value add from the Māori economy has been $17 billion. Significant increase from 2013, which was $11 billion. So the Māori economy is growing significantly faster as a segment of the Aotearoa economy. Of course, agriculture, forestry and fishing is a significant part, as well as the property sector, but very interesting is manufacturing, construction, and it might have an input in terms of retail accommodation. So tourism is not a separate sector. We have calculated the tourism sector in terms of satellite accounting. We think that the value add from tourism from the Māori economy is very close to $1 billion, $795 million. And we do know that that's the part of the economy that has been significantly impacted by COVID-19. We have seen that delivering well-being and the future challenges for the Māori economy. So we've seen that Māori collectives and businesses are delivering well-being across several dimensions through a multitude of efforts, including community engagement, participation, contribution, whānau and family caring, paid employment, unpaid employment. Because we can't count it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. And trust and business enterprise activities. Although it is a very positive focus on the Māori economy, we know that there are still significant challenges. We've seen this increase in education, high-skilled jobs, but still 50% of Māori are employed in low-skilled jobs. We know that right support for SMEs, for Māori businesses, need to be a focus. We also know the distribution of income and wealth around home ownership and in-work poverty is still an issue. And lastly, we know that with increasing skills, we're not there yet. And we still need a multi-generational effort to get there, because 50% are still in low-skilled, low-paid jobs. There are many things in this report that I have not touched on. I was told I only have 20 minutes to have a focus. So for us, it is about this pātaka of knowledge and making sure that we see this pātaka of knowledge and we don't look at one single figure in isolation, that we look at it collectively and what the impact of this collective data and knowledge is on Ōhanga Māori and Aotearoa. Kia ora.
We're open for questions, and there'll be a couple of roving mics there.
Tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa. Iwan Tahana here from One News. Can I ask a couple of the points that really stood out to me, the dramatic growth in employment. I think the report uses the word dramatic, and so did you. Does that flip the script in some way? Because one of the repeated kind of stories that we see is Maori unemployment, but this is kind of looking at it from a different angle, that between 2013 and 2018, more than 100,000.
Yes.
How would you describe that? I'm not sure if you all want to take a pop at that question, but that seems to be quite a massive finding in this report.
Yes. So only focusing on the data, it is a significant increase. So we do think it is a combination of things. It's a combination of the generation that was in education moving into the workforce. We have also seen quite a significant proportion of Māori coming back to Aotearoa, which is in that middle age, middle class, coming back to work and live in Aotearoa. So I think it's a combination, and then of course population growth. So a combination between those three things has led to this dramatic change in population and employment.
Does that hearten you, Tracy, when you see that number, more than 100,000 Māori over that short time period?
Tēnā rā koe, Evan, me ngā mihi kia koe e hoa. I think that there is a real story to be told about the Māori economy, and we're hearing it now. I commended Burl and the Reserve Bank for stepping into this space and for providing an update on the report. This is a report that is based in fact and figure and data, and that can be challenged and it can be interpreted different ways, but the fact is that the Māori economy has a significant role to play in the overall wealth and well-being for Aotearoa. I like that we are hearing the real story. I like that we're hearing the success story of the Māori economy, and I like that this report puts it front and centre for open conversation and discussion.
Do you think part of your role is breaking down stereotypes that exist of Māori unemployed? Do you think that's part of your role? And you seem to be saying, is this part of the Burl's work, the Reserve Bank, your work as well?
I think that a spin-off and a positive unintended consequence of this report will be the change in stereotypes. I think that it is convenient to describe Māori as down and out and underwhelmed, underemployed and unemployed. I think that there is a positive story to be told because of the facts, and we've seen that in Te Ōhanga Māori 2018 today.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just add that it's great to have a fact-based report, to really build our knowledge around that period of 2013 to 2018. We saw a strengthening in the economy and in the labour market more generally right across the country, and what this report highlights is that the Maori economy was at the heart of that and a driving force within that. What I find the report really useful for as well is to help us look forward and into the future of what the labour market's going to look like in the future, and it is one increasingly that it is going to be a Maori workforce, and the entrepreneurship that's coming through in this report, and the way that increase in skills, those with skills owning and operating businesses, that is the way of the future.
2.2, you made the point, I think you made the point, but Christian, if I could get you on this, the post-treaty sort of settlement environment, 2.2 billion over 25 years, that's really only a small component of this, nearly $70 billion worth of assets. Does New Zealand, have we caught up with that as a country, or do we think in terms of the Maori economy as just being treaty settlements? Across New Zealand, have we caught up with what this is saying?
No, I think that this report is part of the role that it plays is to bring our knowledge up to speed and ensure that it is fact-based. There is a perception that the asset base of the Maori economy is linked closely to treaty settlements and reliant on treaty settlements, but what this report shows is that is not the case. It shows, it breaks down a lot of preconceptions, the diversity of the Maori economy, the way it's growing. So, to us, it's that step, information, awareness, understanding, being able to make good, informed decisions. So we're really thrilled with what the report's doing in that front.
You mentioned entrepreneurialism. I always have trouble with this word. Entrepreneurialism. That's my RNZ friend. What can you say about that specifically? It might be, I'm not sure who, but what can you say about that specifically, about what that looks like? Does that draw from Māori values? What are you seeing in that space? Might be you, Tracy, I'm not sure.
In terms of the data, I'll talk about the data. So in terms of the data, we have seen a significant shift in Māori businesses. I think it's to do with, it is entrepreneurial spirit. It's also a follow-on from supporting. A lot of businesses do tend to fall out from iwi and from their trusts, where they provide opportunities for other businesses to support the collective. So we've seen a lot of that. But also the second part is there's a lot more opportunities for Māori to go into businesses that comes from having a highly skilled job. So you see legal firms, economic consultancy firms, you see a lot of those firms move up and becoming Māori entities. So I think it's quite a combination of things and opportunities that have been created for Māori to be more entrepreneurial.
I think the entrepreneurial nature of Māori is in our DNA. I think that we, and this isn't data-based, this is just my sense, world according to Tracy Haupapa. My sense is that through the hard-fought gains of Māori leaders, and we've talked about some today, and the success and progress of Māori organisations and entities, whether they define themselves as tribes or as businesses or land authorities or otherwise, has given confidence and courage to Māori individuals to say we're going to give it a go. And I think to Hilmary's point, where you have a tribal organisation or an established business, a Māori-owned business, that provides an umbrella and support for those businesses to develop, grow and to spin off makes some sense. And we've got classic examples of those here in Pōneke and across the Motu.
COVID. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just what I'd add on Māori business is that, one perspective is the contribution of Māori business to the economy. But also the other perspective is just how it changes the composition of the economy, and the perspective that businesses take when they make decisions. One of the common features of Maori business is that taking a longer term view, taking an intergenerational view, taking a broader view of well-being, to the extent that our economy is made up of more entities with that Te Ao Māori perspective, that will change the shape and dynamic of the way that our economy develops and potentially make it more resilient.
COVID, this only goes to 2018, so before the last year, 2020. What pitching forward, like how will these figures 2018 have hit? You mentioned tourism before. Can you talk about do we know what the impact is on the Māori economy because of COVID?
Yeah, so our view would be that this report is still very much valid. It does create a good snapshot. It does describe those drivers that we're seeing over that longer term period. It is true, as Hilmare highlighted, that the Māori workforce has been more exposed in some of the more exposed sectors to COVID, tourism, retail, and others. So that is a factor. But something that we look at the Reserve Bank in terms of the overall resilience of the labour market, and it's been much more resilient than we had feared going into COVID initially.
Connor Whitten from TV3, kia ora. I guess just picking up on that point then, I think if you look at the labour market figures from September quarter 2019 to 2020, the rise in unemployment is bigger in the general population than in the Māori population. So what is it about the Māori economy that seems to have made it more resilient despite the challenges of COVID-19?
I think it's a combination. The first is in terms of where the asset base is currently. So a significant proportion is in agriculture, food, which, as you know, had a slight glitch in logistics when we started COVID, but bounced back immediately. The other part is that in the workforce, with every previous, we have an economic shock every 10 years, so every previous economic shock, Māori was adversely impacted. But this one, we know that a significant proportion of the Māori workforce are in the high-touch sectors that did really well through COVID, like education, social, health. So a significant proportion of the Māori workforce was sort of sheltered from that. Where there was exposure was in the tourism sector, where we know that there are quite a few businesses, Māori entities, that have lost a significant proportion of their workforce to tourism. So it's sort of the Māori economy is an economy of like two halves, and that showed clearly during COVID.
So if you had to highlight the areas of the Māori economy that were worst impacted, tourism, anything else?
What we've seen is definitely the tourism sector, some logistics, entertainment, so everything to do with where you had to have a high touch and exposure to the outside world have been severely impacted.
Tracy, I just want to ask you, you opened with that quote from Manuka, which said the Pākehā economy doesn't enhance Māori life. Looking for all of you really at this report, what can be done differently? What are the recommendations? How can it enhance Māori life?
Tēnā rā koe hoa me ngā mihi. I think the report provides, and I'm using the word loosely, a pathway to advise how Māori culture, Māori values and Te Ao Māori thinking might inform strategic policy, plans and otherwise to create an Aotearoa economy. And I know that sounds a bit fluffy, but the fact is every single one of us in this room has a commitment to kaitiakitanga. Everyone in this room has a commitment to manaakitanga by merit of the fact that we were born here in Aotearoa and we live in this time. My sense is that the New Zealand that we live in today, and I'm grateful for it, I mentioned it a little bit before, and the New Zealand that we were living in 10 years ago has completely changed. we have grown up. We are more open to acknowledging our Indigenous roots as a nation. We celebrate those. The kaupapa Māori approach is infused in policy, in media, across businesses, across the sector, and I think my sense is that's who we are becoming, even though some people aren't so comfortable about that. I think too that Māori are being recognised for their, and Elmarie uses the word skills and experiences, and that's exactly what's happening now. Do you know, the top 100 or the 120 businesses, Māori-owned businesses and entities that Elmarie and the team were researching are some of New Zealand's most successful businesses. Oh, and they're Māori, and they're Māori-owned and operated assets.
Christian, I just wonder if you have anything to add to that about what the New Zealand economy as a whole can do. This is obviously one of the fastest growing sectors in the economy.
Yep.
How can we support it better?
Yes, I'd support the comments that Tracy made, that we can't put the Māori economy in its own box in a sense, and from a Reserve Bank Te Pūtea Mātua perspective, there are implications of this report that just touch on everything that we do and everything that we're interested in, as I mentioned earlier, from financial inclusion, climate change, resilience of the financial system, the employment understanding, the labour market. So we need to integrate Te Ao Māori into what we do. It is who we are. We are the central bank for Aotearoa. It's what makes us different from the Bank of England. You know, this is our country, our economy. For us at the Reserve Bank, out of that spectrum of issues, financial inclusion, access to capital, you know, they are very things close to our heart. We're the banker to the banking system, to the Crown. Those are issues that we feel like we can get around the table and work with others on. But it is very much an issue of collaborating. You know, this is not like moving interest rates, which we can just do by ourselves and not have to ask for permission. This is something that we'll have to work with others to do, and we're very eager to do that.
So I guess on the flip side, and then I'm happy to pass this on, maybe Hilmari, you could speak to this. What are the biggest barriers that you came across in putting together the report for people in the Māori economy?
In terms of barrier for us, which is very practical, is the data barrier. As you know, data is knowledge. Knowledge leads on to insights. So it is working, I think, for us with government entities, Stats New Zealand, but also being mindful of data sovereignty, because that is important. But what we have seen during this one, and I just commented on it last night, was in 2010, when we did this the first time, we really struggled to get the data and information. This time round, the top 120 entities, if we couldn't get a financial report, it was a phone call, and they were happy to share that information with us. So it is building and developing that data and knowledge and insight to contribute to this, to the data that is needed for us to make good decisions.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I think just to clarify what I was asking, there's a section of the report that highlights that access to capital, for example, and social inequities are some of the things that are perhaps holding the Māori economy back. I just wonder if you could speak to that.
So for us, what we found are the biggest ones is focusing on education. Like we did say, it is intergenerational education that needs to be a significant part of the focus going forward. If you gave me $1 for economic development, I will spend 80 cents on education. So that will be a significant part of going forward. The next generation workforce are going to be Māori. If we want to retire, we have to make sure that the next generation are well educated and can contribute to the Māori economy as well as to Aotearoa economy. The second one is Māori businesses, access to capital, access to knowledge, access to capability, capacity. All of those things need to be interlinked. Then again, linked to education is in-work poverty, so we can only address that through education, better quality jobs. And then the last one is homeownership. What we are seeing is this growth of this significant Māori middle class. Now, 10 years ago, if you were in that middle class, you could buy a house. Now you have a huge part of that middle class that cannot buy a house. and a lot of entrepreneurship is actually based on mortgaging your house to start your business, because getting an overdraft is bloody expensive. So it is having access to that part to be able to continue that. So those are the three things that we would say would be the focus.
Kia ora, thank you.
I only have a few more questions. It's a couple of things that you're talking about, access to capital. You talked about owning a home, which allows entrepreneurs to get a mortgage, to fund their business, basically. 45%, I think, in the report, only 45% of Māori own a home. In terms of policy making, does the government need to think more creatively about access to capital for Māori entrepreneurs? I'm not sure who that, but I mean, should there be some more creative thinking around access to capital for Māori, given less than half of us, well, more than half of us, don't own a home?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of issues sort of underpinning your question. One is around the government's general, policy approach around housing. So I think there we can't really. Māori access to housing, home ownership is part of that broader policy or broader approach. So that needs to be considered within that perspective. And there are a number of agencies of government that will be involved in that. And I know that the government are currently working and thinking across those different agencies on those issues. So there's one strand of work around that. There's another strand of work around the workings of the financial system, how banks operate, their credit standards, their policies, their approaches, how they manage risk. So there, I think it's the government and agencies like the Reserve Bank working with the banking system and the financial system to really get to the heart of some of those issues and work together on those.
But is there? I hear what you're saying. Government are doing this bit. Banks should be looking after this bit. But should there be some more creative policies, because shifting that home ownership part of the equation is really difficult for Māori. Mm-hmm. We've known this for a very long time. Yeah. If you don't get movement on that, how do we grow that Māori entrepreneurial? We might have the spirit, but we might not have the cash, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
One of the things is, it's not only for Māori entrepreneurs, I think it's New Zealand entrepreneurs. Venture capital is not a big thing in New Zealand. So having access, to high risk people with lots of money to invest has always been an issue in New Zealand, and it is for Māori entrepreneurs. One of the other more alternative ways of looking at it is a significant proportion of Māori collectives have assets in portfolio funding. And it could be that a lot of Māori entities could collectively look at shifting some of that money into venture capital or into a sort of a fund that can support and develop Māori entrepreneurship. So then it's driven by Māori for Māori. And it won't need the government or the banking system. Yep. It can run that on a values-driven system specifically for Māori entrepreneurs.
In fact, that's happening now.
Tracy, can you add to that?
My side comment to Hilmarie is that kind of investment pool and approach for Māori, whether they're tribal or Māori authorities, is already happening now. And that's simply in order to make progress. So despite of the system or the framework, we need to make progress, and so Māori will always find a way. But I think too, housing is one of the big ticket items for Aotearoa this year, in fact, for this term. And so I think your question is right with regards to how the housing crisis impacts us as Māori, and we've seen an insight into that through Te Ōhanga Māori. It goes to the point, I think, Connor was making earlier, what can we do or what needs to happen in order to shift the dial for Māori positively, and that means more Māori at the table making decisions on key issues like these.
Can you just, is there an example, sorry, I know a couple of questions, is there an example of, you said it's already happening in terms of this pooling of a fund of money, is there a sort of an outstanding example you could name?
There are start-up examples of kind of Maori anahera investment options, if you like. Within FOMA we have groups of some of our more successful organisations and members who are doing that already.
And just finally, data, what you said about data as a Māori reporter, it can be so frustrating, when the general New Zealand gets, the unemployment figures first, but we have to wait. What is the Māori? Do you think that this report needs to come out yearly, I suppose, is my point? Instead of the last one we got update was 2015, wasn't it?
I think that's a fantastic question, and we shouldn't have to wait around every 5 years to have this conversation. So better data is going to be part of better decision making, so we need to figure out how that becomes part of the solution as well, all in the spirit of making well-informed decisions. So I'm sure there's a business opportunity there for you, Māori.
Yeah, sure. Yes, from me.
Kia ora tātou, it's Richard Laverty from Te Puni Kōkiri, Hilmare, and you all, congratulations on the report. It's excellent to see it out there. I was wondering if you had any comments about the findings of the report and how they align with the recent Productivity Commission draft report on frontier firms, which seems to be sort of building on our belief that there's a lot of untapped potential in the SME sector, Māori SME sector, by also saying that Māori exporters really have the potential to be frontier firms based on values. They innovate faster, they're growing faster, etc. And just wondered if there are any sort of findings that align, particularly this discussion about capital intensity and access to capital, because the Productivity Commission report's obviously pointing to the lack of capital intensity in a lot of our exporters as the reason that we're still behind some of the other small advanced economies. So just some comments on that if you have any.
No. You can go.
And in terms of looking at the frontier firms, it looks at maybe a slightly different definition than what we would have used, but it is looking at export potential, and within the Māori economy there are it's a two-tier economy. There are significant, very successful entities that are already exporting and don't need support. Then there are this next group of Māori entities that will need support. So it's having that support throughout the value system to support Māori entities to become export ready. And I have always been very vocal about that there's not enough support through the system to get Māori entities export ready. And that is from startup. There's not a lot of support for Māori entities being startups. Then there's a bit of support in between. You have Potama, and then this big jump to New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. So there are quite significant gaps in the system that needs to be looked at to support Māori entities to become frontier companies.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Mike Walsh, Foreign Affairs and Trade. Firstly, just to acknowledge the report and how much I'm looking forward to reading it and what a great resource it will be for us. In terms of our Foreign Affairs and Trade mahi, Tracy, as you well know, there's huge interest globally from other Indigenous groups in terms of what is happening here. And this is a resource that we can share with them, but also acknowledging that there is a lot that we have to learn from them as well. And secondly, just putting my iwi hat on, I'm the chair of a financial entity for Ngā Rauru Kitai, and these are exciting times for us. And I'm sure what the report will highlight is that what is good for the Māori economy is good for the New Zealand economy as well. We are investing in Aotearoa, we are employing our own, we are employing more than our own. We are putting money back into that rural economy, which is so important. And that's a good story to be telling. These are exciting times. I look forward to the next report, hopefully earlier than the next 5 years. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora koe, me ngā mihi.
No more pātai? Oh, just go up there, eh? Alright, tēnā nō rā tātou e hikama. Tuatahi he mihi ake ki tā tātou pai kai awha i tēnei rā. Christian, Tracy, Heo Māori mo te whakautu i ngā pātai, te whakātu i ngā whakāturanga me te whai whakaro ki te ahuatanga o tēnei Ōhanga Māori. Tēnā koe mai ki tō pātai, so we hopefully we don't have to wait another 5 years. But kai a koutou tēnā, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, you fellas can pay for the next one. No. And then there's some MB people here, so you fellas can pick up the next one after that. And TPK, you fellas can pick up the next one after that. We do a rotation, collaboration, ata tuari haere tēnei ripata. E whai e riro moni ai a Heo Māori e me Bill, I roto I ngā tau kei mui a tātou. No, with that, thank you all. There's a couple of people I just want to mihi to that are in the room at the moment. Gail Price, who koe te project manager for this project in the bank. So Gail, thank you very much. And Finn, who did a lot of the writing on behalf of the Reserve Bank. So mihi atu kia koe. And our assistant governor, Simone Robbers, who allows Ngārangi and I to go around and do these sorts of kaupapa. We really appreciate it. And Emily and Oliver helping us with the communications and te whakariterete and setting all of this up. So really thank you all. It's a bit of a shout out to us in the bank, and Ngārangi just gave me the quick eyes, but I already saw it. I'd like to thank our manager, Natalia, for always supporting us too. No reira, hika mā tēnā koutou. I runga I tēnei āhotanga, ka karakia tātou te whakaoti tā tātou kaupapa. Just a bit of a whakaro e kororo nei mo te pātaka. Nā tēnei karakia, nā kahukura mo te rua kumara. The information was, all the kumara was stored in the rua kumara, and he went and opened the doors. E maringi ai te kumara, e toha ai ki te ao. Te tēnei me te kumara. The kumara, at that time, that was currency.
Yes.
That was te kuro o Hawaii. So, he karakia hei whakakapi a tātou, hei whakamānu atu tā tātou kaupapa, te koe, te ua nuku, te ua rangi, te ua patapata, te whererei iho a tae o mātuku, te whererei iho a tae o pani. Taputaku kiri e, ko te ripiripi o te rangi, te whakaronga atu te ati tipua, te whakaronga atu te ati tahito. Tīnā tōka, rarau te whegenui a muturangi. Tīnā tōka, te pari ki Hawaii. Whāna, hala mai te tōki, haumi e, hui e, tā e ki e. Kia ora koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora.